This edition of Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Tim, Allison Cook, Eric Hervin, and Super Inframan. If you want to learn how you can sponsor the show, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight, I have with me Mr. Wren Collier.
Hey, everyone.
And Mr. Chris Ernst.
Greetings, all.
And originally, Chris, you were going to be live in studio, but we've had to postpone that.
It was. Yeah, I know, having some family troubles that are preventing me from traveling right now, but we will reschedule that for the spring.
Yes, and that'll be a fun show. We'll make sure people can call in if they're listening live when we do that. This, unfortunately, will be pre-recorded. But what I want to do with this show is kind of freeform. I don't want to limit what we're going to talk about or set a specific topic. I kind of want to cover stuff that's happened in the last year and anything else that's on you guys' minds. And I want to hit a couple of questions I've been given repeatedly that I've probably answered at some point early on in the show. And people are like, where do you talk about this? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, we're coming up on, is it 6 years or 7 years? I always forget. I started in 2013.
Oh, yeah. Then
so
we're coming up on 7 years. Yeah.
So in 3 weeks, actually. So it's a lot of shows.
Oh, it's auspicious. Nice.
I don't number them because it didn't really, a lot of people do this stuff and they go into it as a podcast. I was doing it as a radio show first, podcast second. Now it's more podcast in a sense, but I've never done the numbering thing like a lot of podcasts do because I've been doing radio forever, and it's just not something you do in radio, really. In radio, you just throw a date on it.
Right.
So, anyway, Wren, you're quiet.
Sorry.
You're usually not quiet. You okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good. All
right, no demons attacking you?
No. Been only dealing exclusively with angels lately, so I'm good.
All right, okay. So we were briefly talking before the show. I'm trying to think back on this year of anything really impressive that's happened in the paranormal world, but I don't really feel like much has happened in the last year. The To the Stars stuff has been there, but I don't feel like they've really produced anything new or interesting ever, really, but especially not in the last year. They did their TV show, which again, I kind of feel the same way about. Yeah, I mean, there's not really been a lot this year that really stands out to me.
I mean, it feels like, specifically in terms of TTSA, which it always is, as Red Pill Junkie always says, he thinks it makes him, it's like tits and ass. Sorry, I don't have to bleep that out there, but whenever I have to say that, it's just more of the same, more developments on sort of the same riff. I feel like the big things, sort of, if you want to talk about really big, it would probably be the Rogan show, in terms of impact. I mean, that kind of did. I mean, it was, and that became the whole Storm Area 51 debacle. But having Bob Lazar and who was the other guy? David Fravor, the two separate episodes they had, that was, in terms of reaching the masses and talking to the masses, that was, I'm sure there are people out there that would consider those things significant, which, it's arguable they are. But again, in estimation of it, it's just more recycling of the same thing.
Well, and when I look at this stuff, I kind of, they're going, well, these people really did see this Tic Tac thing. And I'm like, okay, I didn't doubt that. I mean, people have been seeing stuff. I know this stuff exists. It's not a question of convince. I guess that's part of it. If you didn't believe this stuff exists, maybe this has more of an impact on you. But when you already know, yes, this stuff exists, people have been seeing this throughout history, it's not a big deal when you have someone up there of, any kind of stature saying, yes, I saw this and it was unidentified. It's like, yeah, so have a lot of other people,
Yeah, right. Completely.
Well, I think this year, I mean, if we were talking about UFO stuff in the past year, I do feel like last year was the year of slickly produced documentaries, mostly Jeremy Corbell stuff.
Yeah.
Like the Bob Lazar documentary came out last year. Did the Skinwalker Ranch one also come out last year?
I think it might have been the year before. But it was pretty close. Yeah.
I can't remember. But yeah, so yeah, I agree with you there, Chris. There was a lot of like public acknowledgement of anomalous, phenomena. But again, too, I think you had the thing with the 2 to Stars Academy stuff. Didn't the U.S. government back away from that, or they said like, well, they weren't actually doing something?
Yeah, something like that.
It was strange. It felt like almost like the project had sort of failed, and they were sort of trying to divest themselves from it.
And it's entirely possible, This disinfo campaign didn't go the way we expected it to. We're just gonna walk away.
Do a Nixonian limited hangout, just kind of get rid of everything.
I mean, they have their TV show, which I think was a big aim of theirs, is to create media and movies and things like that.
I mean, if we're still more in the world of conspiracy and UFOs and stuff, I think last year was really big for like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff coming out.
Well, that's true.
A lot of that stuff came out, and that like I was staunchly anti-QAnon for a long time. I'm not a QAnon guy now, but basically I was like, oh, this stuff is all just crap. None of this is true. But then you start actually, the Epstein stuff came out. You actually start looking into it, and it's like, maybe more of it is real than I originally thought.
Well, it seemed, yeah.
Isn't that the way to hook people, though? Throw a little bit of reality in with all your fiction?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I feel like whether or not you want to go into how deep the actual conspiracy is, I feel like there are nuggets of truth. There's truth in there mixed with, all of the hyperbole and the, Pizzagate stuff. I think it's there. And I think as we see, by no means getting into politics, but like we see more and more just like the rot and corruption that is underneath like all of these, like political and, like social, organizations and constructs, and I have no doubt that there is that whether or not it's Hillary Clinton and John Podesta and spirit cooking, which I think that's just sort of that's like rich people and modern art there in that particular instance. That's the only thing going on there. But there being pedophilia or rampant, I guess, basically rampant abuse of power, in the way that we just see everywhere. I completely think that there's something going on, and there was something going on there with Epstein.
What was wild was I think like the Pizzagate stuff, because that was more the year before.
Right.
It was almost like it was getting out ahead of something. Because if you really pay attention to the people who were the biggest parts of like the Pizzagate thing, like Mike Cernovich and Jack Sobiech, those guys, or Cernovich in particular, is really good friends and partners with Alan Dershowitz.
Yes.
And Dershowitz has been implicated in some of these things.
Yes.
Not going to say too much because he likes to sue people, but
right.
But he's been alleged to have taken part in some of these things, and so it almost feels like that was a disinfo campaign started before the actual Epstein. But the big thing was, like you said, it was people on all sides of the political spectrum that are implicated in this child trafficking thing.
Yeah.
And what's wild about it is that like the people who are in power, it's almost like you look at the way the mainstream media handled, Epstein's quote unquote suicide. And it's like, I guess everyone maybe has this moment in their life, right? Where you look at what the mainstream media is saying and you think to yourself, like, am I going nuts? Because this doesn't make any sense to me. Like what they're saying does not match reality at all.
Well, just today I saw a couple of articles I guess like the security footage was I'm sorry, they're saying it was lost.
Yeah.
Right. And his like cell phone was lost. Again, I'm doing my air quotes here, lost too. I mean, it's I facepalm every time I hear something like that.
Yeah.
It was really weird. Somebody had made the comparison that the equivalent of that would be Alan Dulles just like getting off a plane and shooting JFK in the face, like in front of cameras.
Pretty much.
All of the media being like, "Oh, looks like JFK tripped down a staircase." Yeah. Such a tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, let's move away from the political sphere and let's talk about Lazar a little bit. I mean, that documentary came out. He made his appearance on Rogan. I've not watched the documentary yet. His appearance on Rogan I thought was kind of interesting. Like, I've never quite known what to make of him. Like, part of me says I don't believe his story necessarily, but at the same time, he seems completely genuine.
That's what's tough. Yeah. I watched the documentary, and after watching it, I was like, well, he seems very sincere, but then there was a follow-up to like why he was raided by the FBI, and I don't know, they kind of played it down, but I'm like, it actually makes sense why he was raided. If people aren't familiar, that like apparently there was some kind of poisoning or murder involving some kind of poison that he may have sold to a guy. I don't think Lazar knew, had any involvement with that. He probably sold it to the guy.
Yeah. Well, that was his business. Was there was like basically dealing in like really obscure chemicals and elements, for research purposes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I've heard people say that the element he claims to have worked with has since been discovered. I've never really looked that much into that, but I've also heard people say it hasn't been discovered. Another element has been discovered that occupies that point on the periodic table, but is not the element Lazar was talking about.
Element 115.
Yeah, that's true. That element has been synthesized, but it does not do what Bob Lazar claims it does. I mean, either it's a different element or Lazar's, if the story's true, he was working with something else.
Moscovium. And the whole, and when people coming from the other side that refute it will always talk about how it doesn't have to be Moscovium itself, but it's a different isotope of element 115. And that's the get out of jail free card that I hear all the time. But yeah.
Well, isn't it possible that element 115 was just a code name anyway?
Oh, completely.
I mean, it's like people take that literally, like it's actually, position 115 on the periodic table, but it could just been just the code name for it within S4 or whatever the place is under Area 51.
It really feels like he was sort of a victim of all this stuff, set up as a patsy to kind of like push a disinfo campaign. Even when he says something about having seen, a whole array of different crafts of different types from different eras, and it's like, what's the chances that would A, be accidental, and B, that's what they would have? Well,
true.
We know for a fact. I mean, one of the reasons that a lot of people don't get this, the disinformation stuff is not always just to discredit like UFO researchers. One of the most important uses of disinformation is to rat out moles within your organization, to find the people that you can't trust. Because you hear that, you feed people certain stories, and then you look for those stories to appear on the outside. And then this person can't be trusted. Like, we know who we told that story to. He went off and told somebody else. Like, we got to get rid of him.
Not only that, but here he was, talking about top secret information, and he was never arrested for it. He was never silenced in any way. He was just kind of left alone.
Because it was just stuff he was fed, I think. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think he's sincere. I don't think he knows what he was used for, but
yeah. And that would be where I would stand on it too. Heather Lynn, who's an archaeologist I've had on the show, when she saw the documentary and heard him say that one of them was like from an ancient dig site, she's like, well, there should be record of that somewhere. And she actually went looking, and I don't think she ever found anything that would have even matched up with them finding something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Unless it was, a secret dig site.
Right. Or really, really buried after the fact. But her belief is there would still be some sense of something was found here and then covered up. But
yeah, I wish that's my dream. That's what I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be ancient technology from some lost civilization. But
That would be cool. It doesn't have to be an alien. It doesn't have to be ancient aliens.
No, I think in the particular Bob Lazar scenario, that's what that's if I were to be writing my fictional version of it for some film that I will never produce, that would be the one. It reminds me of what was that show that I really liked, Fringe.
Fringe was great.
Yeah, it had some great seasons, and the one that had to do with the antediluvian, like the first peoples, and I don't mean that in sort of indigenous, but like a first civilization that had these crazy like new gods looking type machines and stuff like that.
I don't remember that. Wow, it's been a while since I've seen that.
Yeah, I want to say that like it's been a while since I've seen it too, but I feel like I have in my mind's eye Joshua. Is his name Joshua Jackson?
Yeah,
Jackson. Yeah, Joshua Jackson in this like some sort of like hooked into some machine that looks like it's from like a Jack Kirby comic book or something like that. This big old thing. Yeah, and he was like trying to. Yeah. Anyway, if people haven't watched that, go back and watch it. It's worth your while.
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is. Yeah. So I mean, the Lazar thing. I think, like you said, I think it was that he was genuine, but the information isn't necessarily what was really there. And he may have been exposed to some real experiments that they were working on. That doesn't mean they were alien. So who knows what the whole agenda was on that thing?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel, I mean, I look at, in my own cynicism, I look at the Lazar stuff in a similar way that I do Roswell, just like, why are we still looking? Why are we still ruffling around through this? Yeah.
And, Skinwalker Ranch, which we're going to talk about at some point, hopefully in the next few months, may not be what it seemed to be either.
Right.
So that's really disappointing if that's the case.
I'm so glad I've essentially ignored Skinwalker stuff, like Skinwalker Ranch stuff, for the last 3 years, because apparently
you were vindicated.
I know I am.
But it also, I read the Skinwalker Ranch book when it came out and was utterly blown away by it. And one of the things is I really like George Knapp, but now I'm starting to really wonder with the stuff he is connected to, and I'm thinking like, all right, is his integrity here in question? Did he know? I mean, he's always stayed faithful to Bob Lazar, and that's always seemed sketchy to me. He was, one of the key people in the Skinwalker Ranch thing, writing the book and everything else. He was in the documentary, which I felt was awful. I feel like I'm not so impressed with George Knapp at this point. And I hate to say that because he was one of my inspirations doing this type of stuff. I liked how he knew the stuff he was delving into, and he was looking for what was going on, not, propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't say this in a way that I mean that Knapp is not a smart man, but I think that he is a useful idiot. Like, he's a person that has an established journalism career. He's highly respected. He's like the perfect vector to use to spread disinformation, because I think he's sincere too. I think he's
definitely
Lazar. Like, I don't think Knapp knows why he's being led certain directions and being fed certain information. But yeah, with the latest revelations about Skinwalker Ranch, it's like, it seems like all of these people are just being used.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, let's look at something that we have diverging opinions on. Well, Chris and I have a diverging opinion on from Wren and a lot of other people. Let's talk about Hellier, because I think Hellier is something that has made a big splash in the paranormal world. I don't remember when season 1 came out, if it was last year or the beginning of this year, but they just released season 2. Was it last year? Okay.
Yeah, it was last year.
Yeah, no, they're prolific and really, amazingly admirable in terms of how quickly they turned around this stuff.
And I know a lot of people absolutely love it. It creeps them out. I'm not one of those people. And I hate to say that because I want to like it. I think they're good people. I like the way it looks. The production work on it is fantastic. It's just, I feel like it just doesn't have anything there. Like they're forcing things. I admit it. Hang on. Let me pull this up. Bart Ooms, who does Flying Saucer Weekly. Crap. I lost his thing. Hang on. I don't want to put down the wrong thing. He has a website. Oh, wait, did I open the website? That would have been the smart thing to do, huh? I did. There it is. UFO Weekly News. That's what he does. He had made a comment on Facebook on the Strange Familiars gathering saying the editing and cinematics were very professional. The content was utterly ridiculous and the greatest confabulation in history. Darren Berger was a pathological liar and they based their whole story on it. And I kind of feel like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, they won the best web series and best director at the LA International Film Festival in December, which was awesome. But yeah, I think the stuff in it is where I have an issue.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and again, I'll couch this by saying, you know, my I guess my lack of interest in it is not the same as I would say for like the Jeremy Corbell films, which I don't think have really any redeeming quality to them. And, you know, if he's listening to this, he can come at me. That's fine. You know, I support the what's being done in it. But I really, it's something about it, you know, it sort of turns me off. Whereas the Hellier stuff, I think it's actually great. It's just not something like, I guess the stories that the story or the narrative that comes out of it, even though it's referencing all these things that, you know, I'm familiar with and that I think are cool. I guess just like there's a spark there of something that for me that I can't kind of hook myself onto. But I'm also the type of person that, you know, I think the only thing that I've liked that's come out in the past decade is Twin Peaks: The Return. Everything else I hate. So, you know, if you're listening out there, you know, all of you, you know, Greg and Dana, I think you're doing wonderful stuff. And just because it doesn't interest me, you know, that's my problem.
Yeah. And I recommend it to people who are interested in this stuff all the time. Because I think it's, you know, head and shoulders above almost anything else out there as far as the paranormal goes. Yeah. I guess when I see people saying, you know, this is game changing, and I'm looking at it going, no, it's not.
Yeah.
But if you aren't that familiar with this stuff, maybe it is to you. That's the thing. It might just be that.
I think that might be the case. Yeah. I don't know. Or I think also too, people who already liked or had in the past, either, you know, for, you know, giggles, you know, or not been into paranormal shows. Or like paranormal programming of some sort, even if it's something as silly as like Ghost Hunters. Mm-hmm. Like for them, this is like a breath of fresh air because it's like genuine. Yes. And it's still working in that same space. But I always really dislike those. Like I actively avoid, you know, those types of shows. So. And
Wren, on the other hand, you right. Like it.
Yeah. Where to even start? Yeah, I mean, I could not have had a different reaction to it than you guys. Jesus. Okay, so how weird do you want me to get? Like, you dial it to 11?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it, Wren.
Okay. It would not be a stretch to say that the stuff surrounding Hellier has pretty much dominated, like, my thoughts and existence for, like, the past year. It is so much more than just a television show. It's so much more than I think even the Newkirks realize. I don't know how deeply I can go into this. Hellier is a recruiting effort for specific organizations that are opposed to other organizations. And I think that the things or people in charge of, like, let's call it the White Lodge, okay, picked the Newkirks because they knew that they were just weird enough to kind of go along with it and not, you know, go all Zach Baggins on it. But they were popular enough that they could get it out there for a lot of people to see, and it would be slickly produced, and, you know, it would appeal to the masses, okay? So that people with the right eyes to see would watch it and would, you know, some people will watch the show and they'll be like, oh, this is creepy. This is fun. This is weird. Some people won't be interested in it. Some people like me, some people like on my Discord server, we look at it and we see something very, very deep. I mean, how familiar are you guys with Lavinda's Sinister Forces?
Not
very.
So, I mean, literally Hellier is like Sinister Forces for the modern age. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that Lavenda talks about in Sinister Forces is reflected in what's going on in Hill. I mean, even the same locations like Ashland, you know, and it's, man. So like very soon after Hellier came out, I was on an episode of Cruising with Steak, and we were just chatting about Hellier and stuff. Greg ended up joining the show because of some stuff we said. It's like featured in a clip in season 2. And when I was talking to Greg, I'd asked him, have you guys actually, because I knew about Secret Side of the UFOnauts. I had zero interest in Hellier when it first came out because I knew the Greg Kirks, I knew the new Kirks as like ghost hunter types, right? And so like that stuff negatively interests me. I don't care about ghost hunting TV shows and that kind of thing. So I just pretty much ignored it. And I was on this show with the Grimstake and those guys, and they started, and I hadn't watched Hellier yet, and they started talking about how Aleister Crowley was involved and stuff. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, how is Crowley and the OTO involved in this? And they explained to me, well, there's like the Secret Side for the UFOnauts. And the Secret Side for the UFOnauts by Alan Greenfield was literally the book that got me. Like that book is the reason I'm on this show, because that book was the reason I got back into UFOs and the paranormal and stuff. And I contacted Josh Cutchin, who, you know, introduced me to you, Seriah. So like when I heard that the Secret Side for the UFOnauts was involved, I got really excited. And when I was talking to Greg, I was like, well, did you guys use the cipher on some other, you know, names and stuff that came up in the investigation? He was like, yeah, we did. And I immediately thought he was lying. Apparently he wasn't lying according to season 2, but they were doing it manually, like by hand. So like, God, that's so crazy. And it's like, so I knew that I understood how the cipher worked. I understood how to use it. So I contacted one of my friends who's a programmer, and together we made a website. It's featured in season 2 at the last episode, but it's called naeq.io. After New Aeon English Kabbalah, and gave that to Greg and the guys and you know, put it on Twitter so everybody could go and look at it. Actually ended up giving a presentation on it at Paramania in Georgia last year. But by providing that tool to people and them able to like use it and understand like how this stuff interconnects with like Lavenda's work, how it interconnects with stuff going back to Jack Parsons and Crowley and the OTO and the Anne of Horus. There like started being like a group of people that I was talking to that realized there was a lot more to this. Like when Greg says in season 2, like, you know, there are these ceremony magicians who are telling me I'm doing a ritual. I was one of those people, because when I watched Hellier season 1, I was like, I was like, this is a ritual. Like it is something, somebody is having you undertake certain actions in order to create an effect. And for the longest time, I thought it was solely Greenfield doing it. That this was basically Greenfield's attempt, because there was all this like knowledge about Greenfield's time in the OTO that I was privy to that they weren't. I believed that Greenfield was attempting to become a magus and like basically usher in a new Aeon. What I'm realizing, though, from season 2 and after meeting Alan is that more, and Alan may still have something to do with it. I don't know. He's kind of a trickster, but I don't think he's solely, I don't give him as much pull as I did before I met him. But my theory right now, and Alan agreed with me, is that it's like the 93 current is trying to reestablish itself. Because all of its previous attempts have failed. I mean, Crowley failed. You know, his chosen successor, his magical child, Frederick Codd, you know, totally gave up, tried to start his new Aeon, the Aeon of Mott or whatever. So he didn't keep it going. Parsons, you know, either blew himself or got blown up, depending on which version of the story you want to believe.
Right.
And he would have been a successor. And then, you know, McMurtry reinstates the OTO in the 70s, but the OTO has not, and I hesitate how much to say here because I am a member and I don't want to piss people off, but I think the OTO has failed to, let's just say, I think it's failed to bring about the new Aeon. right? There's not that many members of the OTO. It's still, I mean, compared to like, I don't know, like people of the Baha'i faith or whatever, it's like nothing, you know? So, but I still think that current and the secret chiefs that run that current are still trying to establish it. And I think that it's because if you look at all the stuff in Hellier season 2, the number 93 pops up everywhere. Like, I don't think there's anything particularly strange about Hellier itself, right? Because every weird little Appalachian town has goblins and weird crap happening in the woods. Okay. Like, I'm from one of those towns. They're all over the place. The Appalachians are weird. But Hellier is a town whose name equals 93 in the New Aeon English Kabbalah. And that is incredibly significant. That town was chosen for a reason in order to initiate this whole affair. And the deeper you get involved in it, stuff starts happening in your own life that is similar. Like, I'm meeting Sunday with a private investigator in Minneapolis who is researching missing persons cases from the 70s. And one of the things he said was that the area where these missing cases has been going on, there were apparently people seeing like people in white robes out in the woods around that time. Like, there's all this like weird maybe cult activity going on, which is like why he was wanting to engage me with it. But then I started looking into other things, and I don't know if I can say the name of the town yet because it's his stuff and I don't want to steal his thunder.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
But the name of the town, I'll just say that when I did some research on the name of the town, because it's kind of a weird name, I found that it was most associated with a certain battle during the Greek War of Independence that took place in a town in Greece called Diro, D-I-R-O. And I'm like, where have I heard that word before?
Right.
And then I look at the town of Diro in Greece, and it's known for its Neolithic, like it's known for its extensive cave systems that were used in Neolithic pagan rituals. And so this town in Greece with this, name that is like something from the Shaver mystery and has a history of like Neolithic underground rituals, has a grammatical relationship with this name of this town in Minnesota where there are all these missing people. And it's like, I'm not saying that these things are like bowling pins that are knocking each other over. It's not like there's a direct cause and effect relationship here. It's just that the weirdness intersects with each other. And it really hit home for me because there's another town that I'm doing investigation on in Minnesota called Stillwater. And if people remember in Hellier season 1, during their Spirit Box session, they get the word Stillwater, like hidden flap, Stillwater Bridge. And so I think Tyler goes out there in season 2. I'm only 30 minutes from Stillwater. I'm really close. And I started getting weird emails in late 2018, even before Hellier season 1 came out, of a guy telling me about seeing black triangle UFOs in Stillwater. And this would have been right around the time they were actually doing the investigation. It was before the show came out. And so I've since followed up with that guy, and I'm going to be making trips out to Stillwater, when it's not Ninth Circle of Hell in Minnesota, to do some sky watching. maybe get abducted. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But when I've basically gone full crazy at this point because like I did the whole thing with a map, and if I put the town that I'm doing the missing persons investigation on and Stillwater, they're in a perfectly straight line that goes straight to Hellier. And it's like, I don't know what to make of this crap. I mean, I don't know, but it's like, it's wild because you guys apparently I'm not saying this to like get down on you or anything. I'm just saying like for some people, it's just like this thing, but for other people, it just hooks them so incredibly deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. All the stuff that you're talking about, that's definitely like right in my wheelhouse. We'll have to look at it again with fresh eyes and not look at it as simply like a paranormal or ghost show, which definitely kind of is the way that I was looking at it before. I mean, the fact that it's sort of, I think that you were able to participate in it too, or that there is some sort of like participatory aspects to it. That's what it needs to be done, is that you can't passively watch it in order for it to resonate with you. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you got to dive in a bit to get to the point that I'm at, which I can't even say is a completely healthy place to be, but it is what it is.
Right.
But you should definitely, I mean, if people haven't read Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts, the complete version got republished. So,
Yeah, right.
make Ellen some money, buy the complete Secret Cipher of the UFOnauts, because it has both the original book and the follow-up book, Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, combined into one book. But it's super solid. I feel like Where Did the Road Go audience would really enjoy it. And if you enjoyed Hellier, like, you definitely should read Alan's book.
See, I have not watched all of season 2 yet. I got about 2 episodes in and could not do it anymore. So I figured I'd just come back to it. But I mean, in those 2 episodes, they really went nowhere. And it feels to me like they're squeezing round pegs into square holes. It's like they go out to whatever city it is where was it Greenfield that met Indrid Cold or something like that?
No, that was wasn't it Darren Berger's daughter, Tanya?
Darren Berger's daughter, yeah.
Yeah, but I thought someone else said that they found out where...
Terry apparently met Indrid Cold.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, the mysterious Terry R. Wrist, which, by the way, I want to say on the record, the guy in the 2nd season who claims that he knew Terry and that he was like a right-wing militia guy is full of crap. He did not know Terry Wrist. It should be obvious.
Aren't they speculating that Terry is Greenfield?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I wasn't wrong in what I said. It's just that it may not be Greenfield.
I've thought about that, and I don't think it was. When I actually talked to Greenfield about Terry, I mean, I can't talk about a lot of the stuff we talked about quite yet, but suffice it to say, I don't think that Terry is just Greenfield. I think Terry is an external person. Now, whether or not Terry's still alive, I don't know, because he's older than Greenfield, and Greenfield's like in his 80s. So Terry would be extremely elderly at this point. So the Terry Wrist that emailed the Newkirks might not be the Terry Wrist that Greenfield knew, right? Because it's a pseudonym. That's what the guy in the 2nd season claims that was his real name. Oh, it's weird, but that was his real name, like Reist or whatever. That's not true. It was a pseudonym, but they all had code names back then because of the, let's just say political activities that Greenfield and some other people were taking part in. Terry Wrist was certainly a code name.
So, they go to the city looking for where the actual Indrid Cold lived. This doesn't fit with, Darren Berger's original statements, which might be the only true thing that Darren Berger ever talked about. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, whatever that experience was not an actual person in a spaceship that lived on Earth. And then his daughter's telling all this stuff, and I'm thinking, this, either someone's playing these people or they're just delusional. And they're taking all of it as like face value. Like if someone tells them something, they go with it. And it's like, why are you not doubting any of this? Really?
I
have a problem with that.
I love getting just knee deep in it. Like completely suspend my disbelief and just go with it. I honestly loved the fact that they went and talked to Tanya, right? Because I'll admit that when I first heard the thing about Tanya Derenberger saying Indrid Cold was dead and all that kind of stuff, I had a good laugh about it. I don't know what I think about Tanya. She seems like a sweet lady, but I don't know what I think about her story. But I really appreciate that they took it seriously. They went out and talked to her,
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with them going out and talking to her. It's the fact that everything they just take at face value. They're not really skeptical of any of this information.
I think that's how you have to. That's how you got to work it, though. That's like how this. Greenfield told me something really interesting when I was driving him back to his apartment. We were talking about hoaxing, okay? And we've talked about this on your show, Seriah, about how sometimes even when people are hoaxing, things start to happen, right? He told me a story about how Jim Moseley, back in the day, him and Barker were like hanging out or something, and they're like, hey, we're going to call in a fake UFO report just to mess with the local cops or whatever. So they called in some UFO report over a dam. Sure enough, the next day in the news, there were people claiming that they had actually seen this UFO.
Right. Yeah.
So did Moseley make that UFO appear? It's like sometimes when you hoax stuff, sometimes it's like it greases the gears a bit, but it's entirely like you can't even think about it like a scientist at that point, because you're like, well, then what is true? Like if you're hoaxing some stuff, like how do you separate the fact from the fiction? And I think you have two choices. You can either accept everything as fact, or you can just call it all fiction. But you can't in the middle. I mean, I don't see how you do that.
I think you can be in the middle, and I think the problem, what you're just describing here, is a lack of our fundamental understanding about how reality works. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't mean that everything's true, but it means we can have an effect on reality that we're not consciously aware of.
Yeah, and that's kind of like when I watched season 1, that's what I thought about a lot. I was like, and that's why I thought it was Greenfield, right? Greenfield he knew Richard Shaver, he knew Ray Palmer, he was like friends with him. He loves like old school pulp sci-fi and Kenneth Grant and Lovecraft, and you know, he's a Thelamite, or he was a Thelamite. He was in the OTO. You know, so he's obviously a fan of Crowley. So all of the stuff in Hellier revolving around Shaver mystery, Crowley, Kenneth Grant stuff, Peter Levenda, Sinister Forces type stuff, I was like, these are all things that Greenfield's interested in. So it's almost like Greenfield wants to create a world in which these things are real, you know, by sending these people out and like having them go through these things. But you know what? Here's the weird thing. You know, like you can look at it and say, okay, well, some of this, you know, you can call some of it hoaxing or whatever, but I don't know how to really put this. There's a thing that happened to me when I was a kid that validates at least some of the stuff that Greenfield was saying that I don't know how to make sense of. Because when I was a kid, probably like 5th grade, I had this friend who told me a story at one point about he knew like some militia group that was hunting like monsters or aliens underground. Okay. And then when I tried to press him on it, like, tell me more about this, he was like real cagey about it. He wouldn't talk about it anymore. He was also a kid that told me all kinds of weird stories about stuff that he'd seen portals in the woods and all kinds of stuff. So for a long time, I just assumed it was all crap. You know, when I got older, I ate it up when I was a kid, but when I got older, I was like, he was just messing with me. He just wanted to be cool.
Right.
But then I read Secret Side for the UFOnauts, and I'm like, this is the exact same story that my friend told me when I was a kid. But I don't know how my friend knew this story because I know he didn't have a copy of Secret Side for the UFOnauts. So where did he hear it from? You know, and I don't know. I don't have any contact with him anymore, so I can't ask him. But it's like one of those things where it's like, there's something going on here that I like got to figure out. You know?
See, and the list of names you just ran off. Okay, so Grant definitely had some issues. I mean, like I really like some of Grant's work. I think it's really interesting, especially like the magical revival and stuff. But I also feel like he made a lot of stuff up, and he tried to force things to be certain things that they weren't. He really tried to, you know, push the Lovecraft stuff into the Crowley stuff, which, I mean, it works to a degree, but he was forcing it. It wasn't there naturally. Crowley had his own sort of trickster stuff going on.
Right. But what you're saying, Wren, is that it doesn't matter whether, like, that's how you create a new paradigm, is you make these things happen.
Sure. Is that, exactly. You fake it until you make it, like literally make it, you know?
See, but, you know, okay, so again, back to the actual episode of Hellier, they go to this, you know, place where they're looking for Indrid Cold may have lived, and they're finding all these, like, you know, oh, we need wagon wheel and this, and there's a library here and a police station, you know, a couple blocks over, and I'm thinking, go into any city and you're going to find all this stuff. Like, they're making connections that aren't significant, but they think they're significant. I don't think they fully understand what synchronicity means. So any type of connection that they could squeeze together is a synchronicity for them, rather than something actually meaningful.
Well, in defense of the cipher, or go ahead, Chris.
I was going to interject that, like, although the actual definition, I mean, if you want to talk about the Jungian definition of synchronicity, is a meaningful coincidence. So really, it ends up being that you can't sort of parse subjectivity from synchronicity. That's all I was going to say. So
fair enough.
At least, fair enough.
So in defense of the cipher, and I think they were using it correctly. I'll give you an example of my own recent work with it. You know, like I said, I've been investigating stuff in Stillwater. There's apparently UFO flaps in Stillwater going all the way back to the 1880s airship mysteries. There were apparently airships there at one point. So when I look up Stillwater in, the cipher, the New Anna-English Kabbalah, one of the first values that pops up on my site is lust and power. And I look at a map of Stillwater, and sure enough, there is a power plant on one side of the river, and there is like a bunch of strip clubs on the other side. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's also one of the other values is the palace. And Stillwater is known for having this really famous, some crazy tycoon back in the olden days built this enormous mansion, and it's called the Alhambra Palace. And it's like, I can look through that list of things that equal Stillwater, and I can find names in there that match things that are actually in Stillwater.
But I'm guessing you could probably do the same thing for a lot of other cities as well.
Maybe. I fully say, and I've told people this too when they use the cipher. I'm like, be careful, because you can read too much into this. But I think when the hits are strong, I think you can't try to bend it. If you try to bend it too much, then you are just fooling yourself. But when it hits, it hits.
So explain to people what the cipher is.
So basically, it is a cipher that is part of the Book of the Law, which is the holy book of Thelema, the religion founded by Aleister Crowley. The Book of the Law itself is a channeled work. It was dictated to Crowley by an entity called Aiwass.
Through his wife.
Through his wife, yes, mm-hmm. Through Rose. When they were in Cairo. And I think it was like 1904.
Yep.
So that was supposed to usher in, the Aeon of Horus, basically. The idea being that every sort of Aeon has like a holy book. Okay. Now in Liber All, in the Book of the Law, there are little hints that there's a cipher included. Like at one point it says, thou shalt find the order and value of the English alphabet. Thou shalt attribute new symbols to it, or something like that. And then there's another part that says, it's like a long string of letters and numbers. And it's funny because like Lavinda does some stuff in Sinister Forces with that string too, that he like ties to the JFK case, which is really wild. But it looks like just a random string of letters and numbers. And after it, it says, what meaneth this, O prophet? Thou shalt never know, but one will come after you who will like illuminate it. And so sure enough, Crowley never figured out the cipher in the book that he wrote, which I think is the strongest evidence for it being a legitimately channeled work. His magical child or successor, Frater Akkad, did discover the first three letters of the sequence, which is ALW, but he never really went any further with it. It wasn't until the 1970s that a group of researchers in England, including Britain's most famous necromancer, or most notorious necromancer, Jake Stratton Kent, basically figured it out. And they realized that there's a couple different proofs that are in it, but there's one chapter in particular that is written on a sheet of paper that has a grid. And this is important too, because at the end of Liber All, Crowley specifically says, like, if this is republished or if this is published, it has to be published alongside like photos of the original, right? Like it can't just be in text. You can read it in transcribed, but it has to include and that's important because one page has this grid of letters and this grid of numbers drawn on it. There's like a diagonal slash going through it and like a little rose cross at one point. And if you like break the letters on that grid, you set it on the grid, you start counting diagonally down, you realize that what it is that it's like an 11 cipher transformation on the English alphabet. So it's like, how do I explain it? It's like hard to explain this without visual aids. If you go to naeq.io and go to the like, what is this page, it'll give you an explanation with visuals and stuff.
Okay.
But basically, it's a cipher based on the number 11, which is the number of letters in abracadabra. It is like the number of magic. But the first three letters are ALW. Basically, like if you go A and then you count 11 letters down, then it's L, and then you count 11 letters down, you get W, and then you wrap back around, and you keep doing that until you have numbers for each letter of the alphabet.
And so you basically end up having a code. So like if A equals 1, and I think if I remember correctly, like B equals 20, and I think you basically can, So it ends up, it's a cipher, a code. Yeah. I mean, it's where each letter of the alphabet corresponds to a different number.
Yep. And it was Greenfield's theory in the 80s and when he wrote his book in the 90s that the weird names that UFO contactee entities would give to people, like Furcon and Aura Reigns and or what are some other ones, like Injured Cold, for example, that these names, if you put them into the cipher, like these names were meant to transmit information to the illuminated, people who were in the know, right? So a normal contactee would hear these names. They wouldn't know what to make of the name. They just think, it's just a weird name. They would put it in the newspaper, and then other people who were in the know would see that name and would know, oh, hey, that's a code. And if you then put those names into the cipher, there are interesting parallels that start to show up. And the cipher is meant to be used primarily with the Book of the Law as the key. And that's the way my site works. Like if you look up a number or a word, it transforms it into a number based on the cipher, and then it looks up other strings within the Book of the Law that matches that number. A lot of them are gibberish. You might have 100 results of things it matches. I typically try to filter things down to like either coherent sentences or like coherent phrases, rather than stuff that is kind of a fragment, and work with that. Like, lust and power is like a good one. But if it's one that's like, is a, hawk or something, or I don't know, like there's ones that don't make any sense.
So I've always had an issue with the Book of the Law. Like I felt that was not that impressive of a work from Crowley. And he himself dismissed it for years after it was written. And so, like, I guess that, I don't know, that type, referencing it as the Book of the Law makes it even less impressive to me, I guess. Of all Crowley's stuff, I think the Book of the Law was the least impressive thing he did.
I don't know. It's my favorite thing he did. I love the Book of the Law. I think it's beautiful. It's short. It's sweet. You can read it in a single sitting. I think it's got beautiful poetry in it.
I feel like somebody had done a work showing that a lot of it was stuff Crowley basically would have written himself anyway, suggesting that maybe it wasn't channeled in the first place, that he actually just wrote it and claimed it to be channeled.
I disagree with that. I mean, the fact that there was a cipher.
I don't know where that is, but anyone can make a cipher.
I thought that. I'm not saying that is a outrageous idea. I've definitely read through the Book of the Law, and I thought, what if Crowley just, pretended? What if this is just all fake? But I don't know. It has certain resonances with me. Like Tim likes to say, it hums with me in a certain way that I can't really let go of.
Yeah, see, it's never done that for me. A lot of Crowley's work does. I really like Crowley's stuff. He influenced me a lot. I mean, like I said, the same with Grant, but there's some of Grant's stuff where I can't do it. I'm like, nope, I'm done. Not going through this one.
Grant's gematria.
And Grant is it's like a word burger, everything. Yeah.
But I just love the craziness. Like, that's what I love about it. Like, I remember right before I did my initiation, like back in January of last year, I decided I was going to fast all week until my initiation. So I didn't eat any food. And I was on like the 5th day. I was like basically delirious at that point, and like sitting in a scalding hot bath, like trying to read some Kenneth Grant. And I felt like I was like going to go insane. I felt like I was a protagonist in a Lovecraft novel, and I was going to go mad looking at it.
And the thing is, I love this stuff for the story of it, but not for like relevant to figuring out what's really going on, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
but for you, it's working. So that's that path works better for you.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think the rabbit hole has an end.
No, neither do I.
I think that it's leading me for sure. It's leading the Newkirks. It's leading a lot of people, but it's going to lead you in circles. But I don't know. It's fun. It's fun while it lasts. So
I think no matter how much we figure out, we're just going to find out there's more we need to figure out.
Yeah, you're just going to uncover. It's like like a Russian nesting doll that never ends. You just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and every little like interesting tidbit you manage to pull out connects to 3 other threads that then connect to 3 other threads themselves, and it just keeps going further and further out.
Well, and it may also be that being inside this reality, we may not be able to perceive it for what it is. We can only make guesses and analogies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could say it's like a video game, except, you know, obviously more real, but we can't. It's not really like that. You know, we can't quite put our heads around it because we're inside of it.
Yeah, we lack perspective. You know.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Like I said, a bunch of people had asked me about my name and where it came from. And I know early on I talked about it on the show, probably pre-Wren. Do you know where the name came from, Wren?
Wasn't it given? I've heard some, I think I remember the story, like it was given to you by someone?
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember hearing that too. But go ahead. Yeah.
So this happened, I mean, all this stuff is kind of inseparable. It happened after a massive Kundalini event. It was like a couple days later. I don't remember exactly how far. Whenever I get my book done, it'll have all the dates and everything in there. But the name. So this whole Kundalini event happened. It shook me up massively. Like, it was not a pleasant experience. It's like all my core beliefs internally just kind of collapsed all at once, and it left me very distressed and rebuilding everything, which is what you need. I mean, that's a very positive thing to happen, but boy, does it suck. And a few days after that happened, I had gone to see the Scorpions, and I was in the back seat of my friend's car. His wife was in the front seat in front of me, asleep. My friend was asleep next to me. And the name Seriah from the ear that was against the window loudly just blasted through my head. And I was like, what the hell was that? And I looked over, you know, and if 2 people are asleep and the other person's driving, the radio's off, and I'm like, did you hear anything? And he's like, what? And I'm like, did you hear anything? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay. He's like, why? What did you hear? I'm like, I don't know. I just thought I heard something. And I was like, what the? And I knew as soon as I heard it that this was supposed to be my name. And I'm like, I'm not using that as my name. And after a while, I started kind of settling with it a little bit. And oddly enough, I did do a lot of Kabbalistic sort of interpretations on it, trying to figure out what it meant, why it was given to me.
Right.
And as soon as I started using it, it started bringing stuff. Like, people started contacting me. And even to this day, it's such a unique name that there was, you know, like a point where I had talked to someone in the late 90s and about her band. And like 10 years later or 15 years later, she's like, I know you. And I'm like, you know me? How do you, like, what do you mean you know me? She's like, no, we've talked before. And then she figured it out because she remembered the name. The name didn't really exist when it was given to me. It existed in biblical times. It was a male name that basically meant something along the lines of like Prince of the Lord or something like that. And then it just kind of ceases to exist. You find 1 or 2 references now if you search hard enough on Google to people who had the name, but it's really, really scarce. And now it is a very common name for women.
Huh.
But it was not until the last few years, and I actually know a couple of people who named their kids Seriah. Not so much because of me, but because they liked the name.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so it kind of brought the name into being in a lot of ways. But I was going
to say Seriah equals 70 in the New and English Kabbalah, which also equals warrior. It also equals armor and faith. And congratulations, Seriah. It also equals I am a god.
Yay, nice. I made it.
We've witnessed your apotheosis.
So, I mean, like I said, there's a lot more stuff that happened in that time period, but that was the basic origin of the name. And like I said, I didn't want to use it. Like, it was a weird name. I'm like, I don't know. Why, but it just kept pushing me like this instinct to use it. And it really did change a lot when I started using it. It changed my interactions with the outside world in a positive way.
Well, when you're initiated, you take a magical motto. So in a lot of ways, it's like it initiated, it rended the veil for you a bit.
Yeah. So, that's where the name Seriah comes from. And that was back in 1991. And oddly, right around the time that happened, every year something different happens. Like something significant tends to happen around that time period.
Oh.
It's almost like a reset. So, yeah. And now there's silence.
No, I was just thinking, I wish I was a better astrologer so I could look at the natal chart at that time period and see how it relates to yours.
I don't think I ever did anything astrology-wise. I played around with the Kabbalah with it a lot to try and figure it out a little more, and what it was supposed to mean. But
at what time is it? I was going to ask at what time during the year, during the cycle is that, if you don't mind? Like what date? Yeah, like what month?
Oh, it was May 15th.
May 15th. Okay.
Yeah, it was 2 a.m. May 15th. Is when the whole Kundalini event happened.
Yeah.
Well, and I can actually pull this up real fast.
and I wrote pages and pages of stuff that just suddenly became completely clear to me that I didn't understand at all until that happened. Like when those core beliefs dropped, suddenly all this stuff that didn't make sense, I was like, oh my God, and I just need to write all this down in case I forget it, type of thing.
So it came in a, I'm sorry, go ahead, Wren.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so it came like in a flood then. It wasn't like gradual. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I had not a similar, but I had a Kundalini event that prompted some very significant changes, particularly in terms of like spirituality and sort of existential relationship with the universe. But it's a slow burn for me. I mean, I'm still going through it at this point. It's been about 7 years. Yeah.
Well, you're lucky if it's a slow burn.
It seems to be. Yeah.
Do you remember what time of day it was, Seriah?
2 a.m.
2 a.m. Okay.
So I've been talking to someone off and on who had a very sudden Kundalini awakening, very, very, uncontrolled and such, like mine.
Yeah.
And she had told me that she didn't believe in any of this stuff until it happened, in which case there's no denying it. There's no way to ignore the fact that this is happening. And I think she said something like, it's going to take you where it's going to take you. You don't really get a say. Yeah. And that is exactly it. And one of the reasons I wanted to do shows on Kundalini is because I wanted to get this information out there, because it's not readily available online. Like if you look up Kundalini online, you get Kundalini yoga for the most part. You don't get
it's either that or it's like the Sting having sex for 16 hours or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. And that's more tantra anyway. But
exactly.
It's one of those things that more and more people, I'm realizing, experience.
Yeah.
And we don't have a paradigm in Western culture for it.
Right.
Because we don't look at this stuff as energy. It's like energy is not a real thing. I mean, you take an energy drink, but there's not this energy that can manipulate reality around you and literally transform or heal or hurt you if it's not flowing properly through you. That's Eastern stuff.
Yep.
Seriah, where were you at when this happened?
I was home.
What city and state though?
Ovid, New York.
How do you spell? Is it OVID?
Yes, it is.
Just like the Metamorphosis.
So I did have this one story I wanted to get to that someone had left or messaged me, I guess. On the listener story show from the 28th of December, he said, you had a guy talking about seeing a Celtic knot when he wakes up. I have seen what I would describe as the same thing, a Celtic knot or the Tibetan knot. It seems to move continuously. I have seen it on and off for at least 15 years now. I had a therapist once who said I should ask it what it is, so I do, and the answer always comes back, I am you, except for this one time. I was asleep and my eldest son had come into our bed, and he was about 4 at the time, and we both woke up at the same time to see one of these knots on the ceiling above us. I lay there looking at it. It had a different feeling to the ones I've seen previously. The others felt familiar. This one didn't at all. My son said, Mommy, I see something. And I said to him, yeah, I see it too, Don't worry, I got you. And as I lay there and watched it, it faded away, and we went back to sleep. So, yeah, one of those stories, someone had seen the Celtic knot and asked, had anyone else ever seen this? So apparently, yes, there's at least one person out there who has had a similar sort of experience.
That's really interesting. Is it a particular type of knot?
No, they didn't say.
Okay.
This one said Celtic or Tibetan knot. But I mean, the fact that you're just seeing a symbol like that, I mean,
yeah.
I would think it's something probably projecting. It even says, "I am you." A personal sigil of sorts, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. The only reason I was wondering if it was a particular one is that I know even if the knot itself, again, doesn't, have any, it might have some meaning, or there might be something in there that, it is, whatever is manifesting is utilizing the knot to communicate something, meaning that it's not sort of a priori like here's the knot here, is that in some way there's a co-creation going on where this person themselves, I don't know what their background is, where there's some significance even if they've forgotten about it, and whatever's happening is utilizing that symbol to try to communicate something. Well, that's really interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. And it's unique. I've not heard of that one before.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done practices where I've tried to keep certain symbols in my mind's eye as I've gone about the day, just as concentration practices and such. And for parts of magical work, just to see if I could do it in some cases.
Yep.
Once you get the knack of it, it's not that hard, but it's hard to kind of keep it there in the background while you're doing normal stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find anything, Wren?
Yeah, I got the chart for that day, at that time, and everything. But I'm not a good enough astrologer to look at this and know what it even means. So I've crowdsourced a bit, and I've asked if anybody on my server who's a little more astro-minded than I am sees anything leaps out at them.
Okay,
but maybe we'll have to do a follow-up episode or something where we go over it.
Yeah, I feel like I should do another show on Kundalini at some point. Because the last, I mean, it's going back a while since I did the first one. I think it was in the second year of the show. And although I've mentioned it here and there, and I've had other people talking about their experiences here and there, I think it's something that would be useful to kind of refresh on and get talk about more so people understand it in case they are experiencing this stuff. That and electrical disturbances. I'm almost surprised when people don't disturb electronics that I know.
I would definitely love to hear more about the Kundalini stuff. I was reading Lucifer Princeps by Peter Gray over the holidays, and there's a lot of stuff in there about. He doesn't specifically use the word Kundalini, but he talks about ancient beliefs in a serpent that lived in the spine and all that sort of thing, and Bertrand was into that as well. So I mean,
it's common across, many esoteric and spiritual practices, even if it's not specifically referred to as Kundalini or, but it is in many ways, it is, I guess, a way of visualizing sort of the continuity of something that exists within the chakra or within that energy center system, within these sort of like functional nodes, and something that surpasses or transcends and is able to sort of join all of those together. And I don't actually know. I'm trying to think. There was something that I was reading recently about it in Malaysian. I can't remember, so I'm not going to try to bring it up. But I think that'd be a great show to have, particularly if there were some people that might have I guess, other ways of or other vantage points about that, about that energy center, the spinal energy center. Yeah.
And chakras were one of those things I had never even heard of when this happened. Because this has been happening to me since I was like 12 or 13, something like that. Yeah. And I didn't know what these things were. And even once I heard about them, I didn't associate them with what was happening to me. And I thought it was all nonsense until I started realizing that, the spots where it hurts are where chakras are supposed to be.
Yeah.
It simply is. It's not saying, unless you're experiencing it, you're not going to understand. But if you experience it, you're like, oh, okay. Well, this is a thing, whether I want it to be or believe in it or not, it's going to do its thing. And the thing is, it can make you physically sick.
Completely.
It can make you mentally unstable. It can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, I thought I was losing my mind because, I would hear things that I knew weren't there, and it's kind of one of those things like, if you're hallucinating, are you crazy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the at least in my understanding of cosmology, which, comes from a very particular, I was raised in this sort of obscure Sufi cult. And so a lot of my, understanding of stuff comes from like Sufi practice and then Hindu, Vedanta, like sort of a mishmash of all that stuff, is that that's where this is where the linkage between your physical body is with your semi-subtle body, which is then the sort of the cord that attaches you to your subtle body, the diamond body, as it were. And it actually works in a at least the hierarchy and how things trickle down is that those bodies are upstream from your material body. Like our material body is it's the end. It's the end of things. And so anything that's being affected at that level of the subtle body or the astral body is absolutely going to come through in the physical body. It's going to manifest there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a core tenet of people who are working in energy healing or, even acupuncture. But yeah, it makes complete sense.
Yeah. As above, so below.
Yep.
When I was dealing with someone a couple of years ago who had some very severe chronic illnesses, as soon as she said, well, I tried acupuncture once and it made it go away for like 6 weeks, and I went, okay, it's the Kundalini.
Yeah.
Because that shouldn't happen if it was just literally only a physical manifestation of something. There was an energy connection there. And once we got her energy moving, it went away, and it was like something she had for years, and it was awful. Yeah. And all it took was redirecting that energy a little bit.
Yeah, I've been trying to incorporate sort of energy work. I feel like that was a big blind spot in my own practices for a long time, because a lot of the Western grimoire tradition and stuff don't have anything about energy work in them.
Yeah, not at all.
But my mentor, who is a Western Hermetic magician, he's also like a Qigong guy. So he sort of teaching us like, well, when you're doing these rituals, you're also moving energy. He's like, you may not realize it because no one in the Western tradition talks about this.
Right.
But like you should move in certain ways and stuff. So like when I do certain rituals, like I try to move in sort of manners like I'm doing Qigong in order to kind of direct that. And like when I'm building up energy in my body, I try to feel it like coming from my base of my spine, like up my head, back down my front of my body and stuff, and trying to work that into my own practice, because I feel like that's a really missing element in the Western tradition, and it's not one that's missing in, like, say, Taoism, for example.
Right.
Like, if you look at there's this wonderful book called The Taoist Altar, and it's like just an encyclopedia of Taoist magical practice. And what amazed me when I was reading it was how much stuff from Western grimoire magic was in Taoism. Like,
completely.
They have magic mirrors that they scry with. They have ritual daggers. They create a circle of energy around them before they work with spirits and stuff. It's almost the same technology, except they also incorporate energy work.
Yep.
I feel like Western stuff tends to want to categorize and label and sort of like put everything in boxes, even in the magical work. Whereas Eastern stuff is a lot more fluid and flexible on how things work and how to utilize different things.
Yeah, there's that big focus in the Western tradition, probably Agrippa's fault, but like occult virtues of things. So like there's less energy work and more like utilizing the associative properties of various materia. So say like, a belt made of lion skin is like solar. And like kind of tacking correspondences, like, Crowley 777 is just like a huge list of all these correspondences. And I feel like they were kind of using those correspondences as like a substitute for actual energy work. But it's kind of weird because like a lot of the Golden Dawn stuff includes energy work, because a lot of it was like people who learned it in India during like colonial occupation there and brought it back.
I mean, that's beyond, I think, whatever came from sort of Hellenistic, or the Hermetic tradition. A lot of this really did come from either, Buddhist or Tantra, excuse me, coming over. And it did. I am surprised as well that some of that got lost. Sorry, can I take a drink? I'm getting caught in my throat here.
Yeah, it's just not emphasized like it was, and I think that's probably the fault of the Western tradition because, like when you're doing like the middle pillar, you're moving through your chakras, right? It uses Kabbalistic terminology,
right?
So it kind of obscures it. So
yeah,
and it's just a Western thing to not look in that energy direction for some reason.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it made the world of difference in my own magical practice when I started doing energy work too. Like just the magnitude of effects I could get when I was actually directing the energy properly was amazing.
I totally believe that.
And here's the funny thing: no matter how much I can show, like to myself that I can affect other people's energy and how much of an effect it has, I still am always skeptical. Like I'm always like, this isn't going to work. Oh, look, it worked. Okay, cool.
What does King Mob say in The Invisibles? It's always surprising when it works, isn't it?
And it works pretty consistently, but I don't know. It's like my brain's never fully on the logical scale accepted it, despite the evidence.
It happens, and then the problem is that magic doesn't always work, and so when it doesn't work, it kind of throws you off. Like I recently, someone that I knew passed away, and there had been some exercises by various people that I knew to try to help them and stuff, and it didn't seem to work, and it kind of put me in a funk for a little while because I was like, is this stuff all just made up? Am I just a complete idiot?
Maybe it's also that wasn't their path. You were trying to change the path they needed to be on,
Yeah, it's possible. And I mean, but I have to think about all the times it did work and be like, well, those weren't nothing. So
right.
All right. So to sum up, it's been kind of a quiet year, 2019, as far as paranormal stuff goes. The few things that did come out weren't anything really astounding. I would say the best thing to come out of it was Hellier season 2.
Yeah, quiet for you guys. I'm all about the Anne of Horus now. So, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law, baby.
and despite the fact that I may not love what's going on in Hellier, it may not do it that much for me. I very much respect what they're doing, and I totally recommend people check it out because, as you can see from this conversation, it's one of those things that can be taken so many different ways. I've never heard anyone say it was done badly. I mean, that's one of the things that stands out. But I mean, even if it doesn't do anything for you, it's not stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I also think it's really important in terms of like, just at myself as a filmmaker and media maker, like this is groundbreaking, having something that this is so popular and well received. That's, really engaging with the paranormal, I think, in a genuine level. Like this is not fake paranormal. Like these guys know what they're talking about. They're, they're referencing the right stuff. Like this is, I feel like this opens up doors, and it's great. I'm very happy.
And it reflects what doing real research is like. It reflects the dead ends and the wild goose chases you get led on when you start investing. I mean, John Keel wrote about this in the Mothman Prophecies. Yeah. When you start looking into this stuff, it gets weird, and either you get weird with it, or you turn Al Bender and run away for the rest of your life.
Yeah. But it also shows how they're growing as they do this. I mean, it's one of the things I did notice. They're widening their perspective as far as what they're bringing into this. And I think they even said that in the beginning of season 2, that this isn't just about goblins. This is encompassing all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, well, that's the right direction.
Yeah.
All this stuff is interconnected.
Absolutely way more than the goblins. Yeah.
And I don't think goblins were really even a thing. I mean, other than maybe the Hopkinsville one.
I mean, like I said, I don't think there's anything particularly weird about Hellier that isn't weird about a million other like little Appalachian towns.
Yeah.
But only Hellier equals 93. And I think that's the real key there.
Yeah.
All right. Wren, where can people find you?
You can find me at liminalroom.com. Also to check out naeq.io if you're a fan of Hellier and you want to play around with the cipher yourself. And I run a Discord server called Lunar Cry. And if you would like an invite to that, you can send me an email at mrapol@gmail.com.
And Chris?
You can find most of my stuff at brightrectangle.com, which is the name of my little production studio, and the stuff that we do there, and friends of ours that do interesting stuff that might be interesting to other people too. And if you want to contact me, you can do so through the website.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I would like to thank my awesome Patreons for all their support and all their help, and for continuing to help me make Where Did the Road Go a thing. So I would especially like to thank those of you pledging $10 or more: Tim, Allison Cook, Eric Hervin, Super Inframan, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Nadine, Damian Tallman, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Maria, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, John Rutledge Foster, Eric Citron, Andy McNamara, Sasha Jorg, Matthias Sunby, Dominic O'Malley, Christopher Vaughn, Riker and Stark, Sean Cosgrove, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Lindsay Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Chris is a hot dog a sandwich, and Carla Mahoney. Thank you all so very, very much. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Where Did the Road Go? And it was the best I think we could do for a recap for this year. Honestly, we just we weren't able to come up with a whole lot, and decided to just kind of freeform this conversation. So I hope you enjoyed it. There is a Patreon extra segment where I talk about some of my recent experiences, and we get into some other stuff. It's almost another hour worth of conversation. So Patreons will get that later in the week. If you want to become a patron, go to wheretheroadgo.com and click on the Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. It helps us out, and you get extra content throughout the month. And we'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.